You are sitting on the sand, plastic spade in one hand, bucket by your knee. And you are digging a hole, because that is what people do at a beach. Here's the part nobody mentions. That hole is a structure. You built it out of a material with no strength of its own. And the thing holding it up is leaving while you work. So how does digging in the sand, with a toy, in front of everyone, kill people every single year? Not by burying them under a mountain. The volume of sand involved is far smaller than you think, and that is exactly the problem. This is the story of capillary bridges. It is a force you have never heard of, and it holds up every sandcastle ever built. And it is the story of what sand becomes the moment it stops being a wall. Because the collapse is not the dangerous part. The collapse is over almost instantly and involves an amount of sand you could shift with your arms in a minute. What happens next is a different material behaving in a way nobody expects. It is the reason a person standing 2 feet away, watching the whole thing with both hands free, cannot help. Before the physics, let us fix the premise, because the way this gets told is wrong in one specific way. People picture a cave-in, a landslide in miniature, tons of sand dropping from above and crushing whatever is underneath. That is not it. The weight is real, but a hole dug by hand with a bucket is not holding much of it. The danger is not what falls on you. The danger is what the sand becomes after it lands. Loose, poured sand behaves like a liquid. That same sand, once it has flowed into a hole and stopped, behaves like a locked solid. Nothing changed except the arrangement of the grains, and that arrangement is the entire video. Start with dry sand, because dry sand is honest about what it is. Pour a handful out, and it makes a cone. Keep pouring, and the cone gets wider, but the sides never get steeper. Roughly 34 degrees every time, on every beach on the planet. That angle has a name, the angle of repose. It is the steepest slope loose grains will hold before the top layer slides off. Dry sand cannot do vertical. It is physically incapable of it. The grains are held together by nothing except the friction of touching each other, and friction alone loses to gravity long before a wall gets steep. Push a hole into dry sand and the sides run back in while your hand is still moving. You end up with a shallow bowl and a sunburned shoulder. Every hole that has ever closed over a person was made of something else. Now add water. Not much. 1 splash from the bucket. The sand does not get softer. It gets stronger, and it gets stronger by an enormous factor. Here is what happens between the grains, and none of it is visible. Water does not coat each grain evenly. It collects at the contact points, the tiny gaps where one grain touches its neighbor. In every one of those gaps, it forms a curved little bridge of liquid. A curved surface of water pulls. Surface tension drags the 2 grains together and holds them there. That is a capillary bridge. There are millions of them in a single handful of damp sand. Together they are the reason a bucket turned upside down produces a tower instead of a puddle. The engineering term is apparent cohesion. Apparent because nothing has actually bonded. The sand is not sticky. The grains are exactly as loose as they were. The water is a clamp, not a glue. Give me a moment with that one. Every sandcastle on Earth is standing because water refuses to let go of itself. And here is the defining property of a clamp made of water. It only works while the water is there. So you dig. The walls hold because the sand is damp and the clamps are working. While you dig, the sun sits on those walls. Wind moves across them. Your own hands expose fresh surfaces every few seconds. The water in those bridges evaporates. Not the water in the sand generally. Specifically the water at the contact points on the face of the wall, which is the only water doing any structural work at all. This is what makes a sand hole different from every other hole a person digs. Soil warns you, and so does clay. A wall of earth cracks, sags, drops crumbs, and gives you several seconds of ugly noise before it goes. A wall of damp sand gives you nothing. There is no crack, because there is nothing brittle to crack. There is no sag, because the grains never deform. The clamps simply stop existing, region by region. The moment enough of them are gone, that wall is dry sand again. And dry sand cannot do vertical, so it does not fall, it runs. The wall turns into a fluid and pours into the space you made, and the space you made is where you are. That takes less time than it takes to look up. Now the sand has stopped moving, and this is where the subject stops being about holes. Fill a jar with marbles and shake it flat. The marbles settle into the tightest arrangement available, each one sitting in the dip between the ones below it. Now try to push your finger through the middle of the jar. You cannot, and the reason is not weight. For those marbles to slide past each other, the whole packing has to loosen first. Every marble has to climb over its neighbor. The pile has to get bigger. Sand does exactly this. It is called dilatancy, and it means packed grains must expand before they can move. Sand that has flowed into a hole and settled is packed tight and confined on every side. There is nowhere for it to expand into, so it locks. This is why a buried limb cannot be pulled free. Pulling asks the grains to slide. Sliding asks the packing to expand. The packing has nothing to expand into. The grip is not the sand pressing down on you. The grip is the sand refusing to rearrange. Which means the sand is not really gripping anything. It is doing nothing extremely well. And it holds harder the deeper it goes, because the sand above is pinning the sand beside you in place. Which brings back the question from the beginning. Why do rescue teams say the instinct to dig is the thing that kills people? Watch what happens when someone drops to their knees and starts scooping. Every handful removed from the surface creates a new slope. That slope is steeper than 34 degrees because a panicking human just made it by hand, so it fails instantly and refills the space that was cleared. You are not removing sand, you are moving sand from one part of the hole to another and then watching it come back. Every scoop taken from directly above also adds load onto whatever is below it. And trained teams do not dig down, they dig in from the side, from a distance, and they arrive with boards. The boards go in first, before any sand comes out. You cannot take sand away from around a person unless something is holding back the rest of it. That is not a technique anyone improvises with a bucket. There is a second problem, and it is why speed matters here more than almost anywhere. A chest under packed sand cannot expand. The load is not crushing, it is simply immovable, and breathing is a movement. And here is the fact that reframes the entire activity. This exact failure has a whole body of law built around it. Dig a trench on a building site. An unsupported hole past a certain depth is simply not a place a worker is allowed to be. It gets shored, sloped, or boxed first. There are steel structures whose only job is to sit in a hole and stop the walls arriving. Someone has to inspect it. Someone is legally responsible for it. All of that exists because unsupported trenches kill workers, reliably, by the mechanism described here, and the industry stopped calling it bad luck. The hole on the beach is the same physics with better weather. A shored trench is a hole with a support contract and somebody on call. The one on the beach is the same hole, running unsupported, in production. Same loose grains, same apparent cohesion, same evaporation, same locking. The only differences are that nobody inspects it, nobody is responsible for it, and the person inside it is on holiday. Ask me last summer, and I would have told you a sand hole is safe because sand is soft. Soft was the wrong axis entirely. Sand is not weak, sand is strong in one direction and completely absent in another. Which one you get depends on water sitting in gaps you cannot see. There is one last feature of a sand collapse, and it is why the numbers look the way they do. When a hole fills, the surface goes flat. No rubble, no debris field, nothing left pointing at where the hole was. A beach that has just closed over, someone looks like a beach. Meanwhile, everyone watching that stretch of sand is facing the other way because the thing beaches are watched for is the water. Over roughly a decade, researchers collecting reported cases documented 52 sand hole collapses. 31 of them were fatal. The total is small. The ratio is the part worth sitting with. Most accidents that happen on flat ground, in daylight, in front of dozens of people, within arm's reach, are survivable. This one is close to a coin flip, and the reason is entirely mechanical. The material moves in under a second, locks solid, erases its own location, and defeats the only rescue instinct anybody has. None of that needs deep water, a storm, or bad luck, so run it back. Dry sand cannot hold a wall because friction alone runs out at about 34 degrees. Water at the contact points builds millions of tiny bridges, and surface tension turns a heap of grains into something that stands up straight. Digging exposes those bridges to sun and wind, and they evaporate with no crack and no warning. The wall becomes dry sand and runs. Then the grains pack, and packed grains cannot move without room to expand. And there is no room. It is not one failure. It is a material changing state 3 times in under a second. My beach holiday has a new rule now. It is a very boring rule, and I am keeping it. So next time you are sitting on the sand, spade in hand, bucket beside your knee, digging a hole, because that is what people do at a beach. Now you know what you are actually building. A structure made of loose rock, held up by water, in direct sun, being taken apart by the weather while you work. Thanks for watching. Every study and source used in this video is linked in the description.